Right, good evening, everyone. I think we're going to start the meeting now. I know more people will join us soon. So, welcome, everyone. Happy New Year. I'm Paul Crickler, and I'm chair of this Roosevelt Island Committee of Community Board 8. Before we go any further, I'm going to ask Rose to run through how things work here when you want to ask questions and things and the usual stuff. Thank you,
Yeah.
Rose.
Yes, of course. If this is your first time joining us virtually, you notice that you are currently muted and everyone will remain muted throughout the meeting, except the committee chair and any presenters as we move through the agenda. Following the presentations, the chair will call on members of the public wishing to speak. You can participate by going to reactions icon on your device and pressing the raise hand button, not the wave or thumbs up, as those will disappear. Only press it once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're calling on the phone, it is *+9 to raise hand and *+6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the chair calls on you. The chat is available for technical support only to help with Zoom software problems, not to ask questions to the chair. They will not see the chats. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you will need to go to participants section where you'll find the raise hand feature there. Please do not raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you, and you can chat me. I'm here for support.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you very much. So, our first agenda item is the REOC update. And I see we have Bryant here. So, if you wouldn't mind, please unmuting Bryant.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Brian Daniels, Communications Director for the Roosevelt Island Operating Corporation. Nice to see everybody. Happy New Year. Hope you had a nice, relaxing holiday season, or as relaxing as it could be. I just wanted to touch on a couple things real quick, and then I'll turn it back over to Paul for the rest of the meeting. I wanted to start actually with red buses, because Christmas came a little early for us over the holiday. The two buses that we had ordered in March of 24 actually arrived a few weeks sooner than we had anticipated. We took delivery of them from Minnesota. Some people saw them being driven through the Midwest. And I guess, I don't know, Rick, if you got a photo of it from somebody, but I guess they caught a glimpse of it in Ohio. Those were our buses making their way here to the island. So we have the two new buses. They are here. They still need some work before they can hit the road. They need to be inspected. They need to be, I believe they actually are now registered. At least one of them is. There's some cosmetic work that needs to be done on one of the buses following the drive over. But the hope and the anticipation actually is that one of the buses will be on the road starting this week, which is great. It's certainly welcome news for us and in the transportation operation. I believe the layout of the new buses are similar to bus 6, for those who are familiar, a little wider in the front end, which I've heard is particularly good if you're bringing on strollers or if you're bringing on carts or things of that nature. So the idea is to get it on the road. The first one, hopefully sometime this week. I don't have a timetable for the next one, but it shouldn't be that long afterwards. And then integrate it into this morning service, which generally speaking these days is 4 buses on the road during morning rush hour. I believe it's either 3 or 4 for the evening rush. I'm not sure. But this is going to, help us tremendously, making sure that we're maintaining a better schedule. We'll update the information about the bus schedule once we have that all finalized, and that'll all be shared through the advisory system. So things are, again, trending in the right direction with that. We also had a new transportation director start just today, which is exciting. We've built out that department pretty well. Transportation director, we have a fleet manager who actually went out to Minnesota and oversaw some of the final specifications for the new buses, which was wonderful. So we are in much better shape with that than we were back in August. So we thank everybody for your patience on this, and we'll continue to keep the good momentum moving forward on that. Just wanted to touch very quickly on a couple of operational things at the tram. Obviously, we have an influx of riders over the holiday season, which was creating a lot of extra lines. PSD is now on site on the Manhattan side every day from 3 to 8 p.m. Initially they were back and forth between Manhattan and Roosevelt Island. In the morning rush hour, they'll be on Roosevelt Island, and then in the evening rush hour, they'll be over on the Manhattan side. We are coordinating better. I think we're seeing more of the POMA station attendants on the Manhattan side, which is something that we've been pushing for some time. We have a new assistant manager who's really doing a very good job of keeping on top of that and making sure that they're doing better work managing the tram platform. To that end, we're also going to try to reduce the amount of people waiting on the platform when the long lines start. So it'll be, we'll let the folks onto the new tram car when it arrives in the station. And then what we'll do is we'll let some more people up as it's waiting there because it has to sit in the station and charge anyway. So let them up and then fill up that car and then go from there and then let up another cohort of folks who are waiting. But again, we're trying not to pack it in like it had been packed in before, like a busy subway platform. So that's something we're going to be working on with the PSD guys and with the POMA station attendants. And we're also adding some additional signage above the seating, which has been suggested on these calls, I think, to mention the priority seating. So it won't just be on the seats; it'll actually be above it on the windows, not too high that it blocks sight of vision, but if they're not up now, you will see them on the windows to try and reiterate that. In addition to continuing to have the onboard station attendants making announcements on those things. So that's it for me right now, Paul. Anything else?
Brian. Thank you. I do have one question for you about the tram. We've been speaking the last 2 months at least about the timing, making it 10 minutes or 12 minutes. And I was hoping you might have an update for us on where we stand with that.
We've done some. I actually did testing the other day at the faster speed with our acting COO Mary Canine and some of our Lightner POMA folks working on adjusting, trying out faster speeds and what the stops feel like and how many sways there are with the stops. They've done a lot of work on the swing dampeners. They're recalibrating those all the time. So at this point, it's about sharing. We're still doing some more tests, and then it's about sharing the data with the Department of Labor and making sure that they're comfortable speeding it up. And we are working on that. We have been continually working on that for some time. They have to feel comfortable with what's being demonstrated by POMA. So I don't have a full update for you other than we've done the testing. We're still doing a little bit more testing. We'll share that data with them. And then hopefully sometime soon we can work on either adjusting the schedule to make it so that it's easier and on the 10-minute mark, which is what we talked about initially, and then eventually moving it towards going back to the old schedule, which is what we need and what we want, and trying to make that happen before the new communication system necessarily goes into place, because that's a longer tail project. But we are working on it constantly.
Thank you for the update very much. Let me go to Margie, please.
Unmute. Okay. I actually don't have a question, but I asked Rochelle List to join us on this call today because she had an experience in the tram that I've heard before, but I'd like you to hear it right from her, some of the issues that they're having, one of which you mentioned signage for the seniors and disabled, but I think we need signage down at the elevator too, because the PSD guys don't all seem to know the rules. So can I turn it over to Rochelle? Phil, if you could, Paul, if you could unmute her.
Please,
Okay.
Can you find Rochelle?
There, you see her?
I see Rochelle on my screen. Can you see Rochelle?
Hey,
Hello?
Rochelle, you should have a prompt on your device. Sorry.
She's between Jen Brooks and Harley.
Yeah. No, Margie, you're not helping. Rochelle, you should look for a prompt on your device asking you to confirm unmuting.
It's blue usually.
Yeah.
A blue button.
Yeah, at the bottom of your device, Rochelle, I see you looking for it. There should be a button that says confirm unmuting. Click that button.
Try and say something, Rochelle.
No, she's still muted right now.
Yeah.
Margie, if you want to just
she got it.
directly.
She got it, everybody.
There you go.
Hey, Rochelle. Over to you, Rochelle. Thank you very much.
Okay. So you want me to speak now?
Yes, please.
Okay. On Friday, December 27th, I remember the date exactly. I was returning home at around, I guess it was around 4 o'clock. I got to the tram around 4 o'clock. I use a walker, okay, and I'm a senior citizen. I know the rules about no priorities, etc., so we don't have to go into that. I got to the elevator and a security guard was there. I know he was a security guard because I saw his shirt or whatever he was wearing. And I said, I need to use the elevator. And his answer was, uh, you can, but before you do that, you must get on the line on 59th Street, I guess it is, and wait. And when you get to the steps, we'll let you go up on the elevator. And I said, I'm sorry, but that is not the way it works. I'm a senior with a walker, and I'm normally allowed to go up this with the elevator when it's not overcrowded up there. I understand that sometimes it's so crowded that they can't let me up right away. And he said, no, you must, you must. And I said, I can't. I said, I can't stand on the line for a half an hour. I said, call up upstairs and see if somebody will let me up. So finally he agreed to do that. And I don't know who was at the top of the stairs. And a lot of the people there know me because I use the tram very often and I am a 50-year resident here. So he said, yeah, you could let her up. And the security guard turned to me and said, I don't know who you think you are. And I said, I am an 85-year-old woman who uses a walker and cannot possibly stand on that line for a half an hour. And my understanding is that you're wrong. And that was the end of the conversation. I don't know who the security guard was. I just can tell you that he was working there at around 4 o'clock on December 27th, Friday.
December 27th, 4 o'clock. Okay. I will talk with PSD about that and see
Okay.
what happened there. Okay.
Thank you. But am I correct that that seniors with walkers or wheelchairs, or even seniors who don't have that but cannot stand on the line for half an hour, do not have to do that? Am I correct about that?
Yeah, I mean, it is up to the, technically speaking, the officer discretion, but in general, we try to make it so that instances like the one you're describing and the one you went through is not something that you would have to endure. So I have to talk with the PSD folks about it. You know, we might have some new people that don't quite have it figured out yet, but I'll
Okay.
figure that out. December 27th at 4 p.m.
Yeah, around 4, may have been a little after that, maybe between 4 and 5, I would say, just to make sure. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Thank
Before,
you.
Yep.
thank you for speaking up, Shell. Before we go to Becca, I said one comment here. First of all, I think it should go without saying that nobody should be forced to beg to use the elevator when they're visibly impaired. I think it's outrageous. But that leads on to the second point. We've talked about this before, Brian. There's a whole bunch of people who have what I believe the term is are invisible disabilities, things we can't see by inspecting and looking at them.
Mhm.
And they should not be put in a position where they have to explain this to somebody and again beg. So I know you have this thing at Brioc saying you haven't got a formal policy and it's up to discretion. But let's just be real about talking to people on this call and how they're treated. Rioch has to find a way to get this right. I think it's outrageous that we continue to live in a time when people who are not only visibly impaired, but people who you can't see, are having to beg with people and then refused. So I'll stop ranting now. Thank you very much. Let's go over to Becca, please.
Hi, actually, so I want to speak about the same thing. I broke my leg on November 18th. and I've been visibly in a boot and a cast since then. I keep actually a log anytime an officer tells me that I have to go wait in the line because I'm physically not able to like walk blocks back. I'm happy to stand at the elevator platform, but I've also been told that I'm not able to use the elevator. One officer even commented that I looked quite young and I should be able to stand in line, which was quite eye-opening to hear, seeing as I was in a visible walking boot. So I also keep record of the time and the shift, and I have like the officer's name because I always take that down. Because I also do think that, like, speaking to Paul's point directly, I have an invisible disability separate from my current issue. So shouldn't have to out myself every time I want to use the elevator. Especially if it's officer discretion, which frankly, especially when I'm in a visible injury situation, you guys need to figure out how to deal with ADA policy because frankly, like ADA rules allow for transportation and not discriminating against transportation ease. So I think that there is something to said about talking about officer discretion versus actually just following policy because it's not just seniors that are affected by this. Like, to be frank, I also saw one of the officers I noted down because he was also getting in a visible argument with someone that was trying to use the elevator at the time, who was an older lady with a walker. So I think also too, to be said that is like officer discretion is being a little too liberal and broad because frankly, like you have officers that are just never going to allow it and officers that are not following like ADA policy. So just something to note there. And I don't know how to deliver that information, but like I said, since the 18th, I've been keeping a log every time an officer tells me that I need to go wait because frankly, I can't. So I've had to like visibly just take cabs home because I can't stand there. So which has been very inconvenient because frankly, the tram is the safest way to travel when you are disabled. So I think there's something to be said there too. And to be frank, I know we're on the tram, but I think there's also something to be said about the signage that needs to occur at the station, which I don't know if that's REOC necessarily or MTA, but I've seen a lot of people rushing the elevator and not giving priority to seniors or people that are having, again, visible disabilities or have like the need to use the actual elevator, where I've seen a ton of able-bodied be able to rush the elevator and not give that priority boarding to people that actually need to use the elevator as well. Because I would love to use the escalator, but I'm not in a position right now that I can. And I want to make sure that we're giving. I watched, again, I and someone else that was disabled had to stay and wait for the elevator the other day while there was a bunch of people that I know there are invisible disabilities, but at the same time, if you're booking it to run to an elevator, I think there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of signage across both of our methods of transportation. So just something to think about and just really reiterating that ADA policy against transportation is a thing that city law. So something to think about there.
Are you able, Becca, to send to Bryant your list with names and dates and things? So, Brian, would you mind?
That's what I was going to ask. If you're comfortable, Becca.
I can definitely.
Okay.
Would you mind putting in the chat your email address and then that Rose will put it in the general chat for everyone? Thanks,
Yeah,
Brian.
hold on one second.
Okay.
Can we please go to
I actually think
Joyce?
I have yours, but
You probably do, but I'll put it in the chat.
Joyce Short, please. All yours, Joyce.
I just unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Okay, a couple of things. First of all, I wanted to seriously commend, I know we all have stories about some of the nightmares that we've encountered, but I wanted to certainly pay homage to the sergeant that let me on the other day. It was very crowded. I had just come from a medical procedure and I was really not feeling well. And I went to the sergeant when I first approached. He said, "I'm sorry, we're full." And I said, "I just had a medical procedure and I really do need to sit down." And he not only cleared the way, but the person who was operating, the operator at the time said, "Let this woman sit down. We're not leaving the station until she has a seat." So I have to tell you that sometimes they absolutely get it right, and I can't thank them enough. I wanted to make a recommendation, Brian. You know, for many, many years, we've asked that the operators have a message that they should be giving before the departure that says, you know, please give your seat to the disabled, the elderly, or people that they don't do it. They simply don't do it. And I've really tried to make note of all the times that I've gotten on the tram and they've made that and they've given that message. And I can't even give you one in the last 3 months. So I'm going to make a recommendation to you, and that's that you have a pre-recorded message. So all they have to do is push a little button and that pre-recorded message, you know, please give up your seat to someone who's disabled or pregnant or elderly, you know, and you know, be a good citizen, and also hold on to the scraps. I've seen people, particularly tourists that don't understand that the tram is going to move, they're going to be jostled, they may not be able to keep their balance, and they might step on somebody in the process of trying to keep their balance. So reminding people that those straps are there for them to use, please hold on. And also, what was the third thing? Priority seating, hold on. Oh, and please be careful with your camera. Don't get in other people's way in order to take photographs. You know, we're happy to have you take photographs, but please be considerate of other people that are riding with you.
Thanks, Joyce. You know, two things on that real quick. We do again have a little bit news management on the POMA end, so I will reiterate again the need for the announcements, and I think we can you know, make sure that the folks in the cabins are a little more accountable to that end. We have also, there is a sound system on the trams. We had played around with it a little bit a few months ago. Actually, it's not great. It doesn't have the functionality of like a subway where like the doors open and an announcement gets made and the doors close. I'll have to go back to them and ask about whether or not it's you could just do with a button thing. I think that's a good idea too. And if we can make that work, we'll certainly try to do that. But
Thanks.
I wish it had a little better functionality than it does, unfortunately, to that end.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Brian. Can we go to Starlight, please?
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, Starlight.
Yes.
Okay, there are a number of issues and problems that I find. The cabin operators are not really the problem, actually. I don't have any problems with any of them. They always make sure that I get a seat. They always yell out with their voice, one operator in particular. But I do run into problems with PSD. And the thing that I'm finding really irritating is that if something happens on the island, like a couple of weeks ago, I want to say a week ago on a Sunday or Saturday, I was going to the other side to go to Trader Joe's, and the line was so ridiculous on the Roosevelt Island side that they had 3 officers on the Roosevelt Island side and 3 PSD officers on the Manhattan side. Now, everyone is saying that REAC is saying, oh, it belongs to the MTA. So why are we using our public safety department that should be working for us if something should happen on the island? And there are 6 officers having to maintain the traffic of people that are not merely commuting, because you're saying it's public transit, but it's not being used for that. It's being used for an amusement park ride. If they're 93% of riders, if they're 100% full, 7% may be residents on the island, and the other 93% are tourists. And I've heard them have conversations about, oh, they need to fast track this ride and such and such and such, and this and that and the other. And 85% of that 93% that are traveling on the tram, 85% of them do not stay on the island. They sit on the tram thinking that they're going to go back to the other side. And the operator has to tell them they have to get off and pay if they want to go back. So 8% are physically getting off the tram and walking the island. Okay. And when RIAC is pushing and shoving down our throats that it's public transportation and it's being used as an amusement park ride, and people are the tourists are talking about, oh, they should fast track this ride and blah, blah, blah. People buying tickets and coming, trying to show it to the people at the booth, talking about, yeah, I paid to ride this. And people that work for the tram or the operators in the booth or the cabin don't even recognize or say, yeah, this is something that you can do. I mean, I've seen it all the time. I saw a young lady on that same day try to use a ticket that she got from Groupon somewhere to go on the tram. And it was 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. And it said she was to go ride on the tram and to go to FDR Park, which closes at 5 o'clock. So I don't understand the logistics of what's going on as far as what it's really being used for, and people paying for tours of it and this and that and the other, and wanting to fast track it like it's an amusement park ride when it's actually a commuter tram and it's not being used for that. Like I said, 93% of the people that are riding the tram now are tourists, and 85% are going back to the other side. So that leaves 8% that may visit the island, go to the kiosk, go to the park, or something of that nature. I also have a problem with people shoving and pushing cameras and videos in my face. I'm visibly disabled, okay? I have a walker. Everybody can see it. You can't miss it. It's large, okay? And I'm tired of people telling me, oh, you're too young. Why do you have that? Why do you need that? Questioning me. I don't appreciate that. The operators, like I said, the cabin operators and the staff that sits in the booth, I don't have a problem with any of those guys. I have a problem with PSD, and I have a problem with Riyadh telling us that it is public transit. And I can clearly tell you that I've stayed on the other side and watched exactly what it's being used as, okay? There's got to be something that can be done. And I don't know, we've made all these suggestions and nobody is taking it seriously. Things have gotten really, really out of control, okay? Roosevelt Island is a residential neighborhood, first and foremost. So when people are coming and riding the tram late at night, that's a disturbance. Period. Especially when they're riding the bus or they're walking down Main Street or trying to go in people's private buildings looking for restrooms and things like that. So I have a problem with that. And these are the things that are catching my eye because I'm out late sometimes. So I see things and I hear things that maybe most of the residents aren't listening to or paying attention to, but I am.
Starlight,
and that's all I need to say.
Starlight, thank you very much for your comments. Thank you. Can we go to Rick, please?
You're welcome.
Hey, and Paul, I just want to really quickly jump in.
Yep.
I know that a few people have chatted me. Whatever the technology issue was with Starlight, if everybody, people couldn't actually hear Starlight speaking. They could see it in the caption. Some people could hear it, some people couldn't. If that happens again, we'll figure it out. But just chat me if it happens again. Sorry, Paul.
That's all right. Thank you. To Rick, please.
So Brian, you mentioned that RIAC is going to start to reduce the number of people on the platform. Can you tell us to what number you'll be reducing it to?
I don't have an exact figure of what it is. I mean, the platform fits, approximately 100 riders, which is generally the amount that we have on, on a regular tram ride. I think the idea is to just cut it off a little bit more before it gets more congested, and then let folks fill it up. I don't know the exact. I mean, the counting is sort of hard to do, I think, in those instances. But just, as you're viewing it, as you're looking at it as a PSD officer or POMA station attendant, just sort of cut off who's going up prior to it getting too overpacked. And then once the cabin doors open and then we let those folks in, it's still going to be in the station for a little while. So let more people up at that point, then you can sort of fill that cabin up. I don't have an exact number for you. It's something that we need to sort of work on and perfect a little bit. But that's what we're going to be trying to do.
So will there be a number that all the PSD or percentage that all the PSD officers are aware of, or is it just at the discretion of the PSD officer?
It'll be more detailed than I'm explaining it. I just don't, off the top of my head, know exactly what that looks like.
So some people have been saying that there are some type of Groupon passes that people are able to use to get on the tram. Do you know anything about that?
I don't. Somebody sent me a Groupon about a walking tour that was like $5, but ostensibly it seems like you're just buying an audio file. There was nothing tying it to a ticket or anything like that. So I haven't seen anything.
So as
like
far as you
that.
know, I mean, access is still either through the Metro card or the.
Oh yeah. No,
there's nothing other than the Metro card or the Omni card.
Not to my knowledge. If you
Okay.
come across something else, flag it for me. But I don't think that's it.
Yeah. And the final thing is that you mentioned that you're going to be putting up signage in the cabin above the seats.
Mhm.
Can you put it up in such a way that maybe it does partially block the views, just to see how that, as a test, to see how that works?
When we talked with POMA about doing that, they were okay with it, but it was important to them to have sight lines clear for their cabin attendants. So, I mean, listen, it's going to go on the windows. If you're kind of sitting there with your phone, I guess it would be a bit of an obstruction, but I wouldn't go. I don't think we're going to go too overboard with how big and how high it is.
It's more about the people that are standing in front of the people who are sitting on the bench, who are kind of crowding in front of the people who are sitting there. That creates a lot of discomfort.
It has to be something that the POMA folks are comfortable doing. So, if nothing else, at least we're, making it a little more apparent and trying to hammer the point home a little bit more to people, what the intention of those seats are.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Can we please go to Karen Johnson?
Yes, back in the fall, I'm a senior and my husband is a senior with a walker. And it was about 6:15, 6:30. We got to the tram and I see in the booth there is the normal attendant who's there, and there was a public safety man in there eating an ice cream cone. And we go to get on the tram and there was a stampede and my husband was pushed over. The walker caught him and I grabbed his arm and yanked him back up. And I was furious and I yelled, "You guys just knocked over someone with a walker." And then people responded and said, "Oh, is he okay? Can we help?" But it was a scary incident and we just don't feel comfortable with the tram now. Maybe in the morning going into Manhattan, but coming back late morning, afternoon for medical appointments, we just don't feel safe anymore. And then also someone mentioned, I believe I heard that you were going to reduce the number of people on the tram at one point, so it wouldn't be like sardines. Did I hear that correctly?
Reduce the number of people waiting on the platform.
Oh, only the platform, not in the
not
cab.
the number of people.
Okay, so I misunderstood. Great. I just wanted to air that because it was terrible, just terrible.
Thank you for sharing that, Karen. Sorry you went through that. Can we please go to Craig on his iPad Pro? Hey, Craig.
Hi, how you doing? I'd just like to ask two things. You guys have been talking about signage, but I just heard that it's going to be inside the cabin itself. I'm wondering if it's possible to put one of those signs up where it tells you how much longer there is for the tram to take off, maybe downstairs on the Manhattan side and maybe out front, because I see people sprinting up, I myself as well, up the staircase, and then also sprinting from the tennis courts over to see if there's a tram waiting there, because at night the lights are now out because the battery's charging, so on and so forth. They're trying to save that. So you can't tell when the tram's going to leave unless you're actually entering the system.
Yeah,
That would be the first thing.
yeah,
All right.
that's actually, Paul, we talked about this at one point. That's a bit of a bigger project that I can go back to and talk with Poma about.
Okay.
It's a little more involved, but
Fine.
that is something that has been brought up before.
I mean, even just a number that says 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 7 minutes, whatever that might be. It doesn't have to be a beautiful thing like you have on the insides you have right now. It's just some, so people aren't sprinting. All right. And then the other was, I see that the agenda is that you're going to be voting for a petition to give priority to people who live on Roosevelt Island to get on the tram.
And who work, yes.
And who work. And what if you're coming the other way? Like I live in Manhattan and I go there to play tennis. And since I live in Manhattan, would I get priority coming back into Manhattan because that's where I live?
Well, the way we set up this request of RIOC is it's for people who live here and who work here, who deal with this multiple times a day, every single day. So at this point, it's just for those.
Well, I play 4 or 5 times a week, so I'm doing that. You could say every day as well. And I think to get locked out from coming back to Manhattan, where I live, where they don't do this on the ferry for Staten Island, they don't do it on the ferries to Brooklyn. You know, it's a public transportation service. So why to be able to single out people who live on Roosevelt Island and not include the people who live in Manhattan? I'm missing that point.
So I guess the best thing I can say is we'll come back to that when we get to that agenda point, and then you'll hear from the people who live on the island here why that's the case directly from.
I live on this island, so that's why I'm bringing that case up.
I've answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you.
We move on to Jeff, please.
All right. Hey, this is to Brian. I got 3 quick things. Just wanted to say I sent you an email as well. So there's some messages there. Second thing, about the guided tours. If you just Google guided tours Roosevelt Island, you'll see under one of the Google sections that there's actually a bunch, and from looking at a few of them the other day, like all of them that cost $30 and above, they all like include in quotes tram tickets. And then a lot of the times I'm seeing that the tour guides will meet their customers on the Manhattan side. And I guess that's how they get the tram tickets for them. Then they ride the tram with them here and do a walking tour. And finally, I have a suggestion for the signage, and this is in the email as well. I think it would be great if we added additional languages other than English to the signage, because a lot of our workers, residents, and especially tourists are coming from other countries as well, and they might not be able to understand the full verbiage of the request for priority seating if it's only in English. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I think we've had a great bunch of comments and questions for Brian, so thank you. That's the first agenda point. Second one is the library updates. I see Brandon is on the Zoom with us. I'd love to hear from Brandon.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hey, so for those of you that don't know me, I'm the managing librarian at the Roosevelt Island branch. I'm just here to share some updates on some programming that we have for this month. We have our usual bread and butter programming for little ones. We have baby story times happening from Monday through Thursday. For newborns and for toddlers, I'm going to put our event catalog in the chat for us to share out. That's the best place to get the most up-to-date programming that we're offering. For adults, we have a few new things. We're doing a Google Suite class. This month on the 27th, we're doing an introduction to Google Drive. This is going to be in person at 6 p.m. We're going to have Judy Birdie, as always, with the Historical Society. I think our guest is to be determined, but that's going to be happening on the 21st at 6:30. One new offering that we're going to be having is we're having an adult game night on Wednesdays. Well, not Wednesdays, excuse me, on one Wednesday, the 22nd at 5 p.m., but that's going to be an ongoing new program. As always, we also have book discussion this month. It's going to be Crying in H Mart on the 8th at 6 p.m. And then we have our very popular crochet class that happens on Thursdays at 12:30 p.m. I think
Thank you.
that's all I got.
Thank you, Brandon. It's wonderful having so many things that you guys are doing at the library. So thanks for sharing those with us again. Okay, that's the second agenda point. Any third one is community updates. Anybody else have anything they'd like to update the rest of us with? Things going on the island? Put your hand up electronically if you do. I see no takers. So moving on to our guest for the evening. So thank you for patiently waiting so long, Skip. I want to hand over to Skip Hartman, who's going to talk to us about the Roosevelt Island Business Association, or TRIBA, talk about the mission and, well, anyway, I'll leave it to Skip to talk about the history of the organization as well. Thank you, Skip.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So it's really great to see all the interest and so many problems the island has to deal with. I think this is keep everybody busy for the next 150 years. The origin of TRIBA, which stands for the Roosevelt Island Business Alliance, probably the most difficult decision we've had to make since our inception was to figure out what would be a good name for the organization. I want to give a shout out, though, to Rick O'Connor for being instrumental in helping us poll people to see if there was a need even for the organization. And at the end of the day, we found that that the major stakeholders on the island, not to diminish an iota the people who live on the island and spend half their life there, but by stakeholders we mean people who've made a major investment in the island, whether it's to build a building or to start a business, that they really had no voice and no function beyond running their own businesses. We all had our own silos, and that it might be an asset for the island to have a group that brought the major stakeholders together to see what they could do to help improve the quality of life of the island and make it just a great place to be. So there was enough interest in doing this that we ended up with 13 full members. Full members are businesses or institutions that contribute $3,000 a year in dues, or if their lease is for less than 20 years, they could pay as little as $1,000, and that we would meet regularly and try and identify a few problems that we could be helpful with. I think the overall sense was that the most important problem that everyone wanted to see progress on was the extension of the master lease between the city and the state. Now there's an alternative to that, which is the city takes over the island entirely and runs it like any other neighborhood. But progress, and I think there was a consensus in the group that we favored continuing with the states as the landlord for the island, because they were as difficult as, and Bryant is here, so I know he's taking notes, but as difficult as it may appear to be to deal with the state, it's even more complicated trying to deal with the city. So we felt that we were better off as a community with the state's involvement, although we would like to see the quality of that commitment improved. But that's probably the number one issue that galvanized the formation of the TRIBA group. Now there are so many issues, many of which you're addressing both at the community board committee level and many of you in other ways. So we felt we needed one or two other things, though, that we should work around or work on. And a second item was to develop an app that would tell people when they get to the island what's going on the island, so they don't just as someone pointed out, just ride the tram back and forth. They actually get off and not just go down to Four Freedoms Park and take a picture and go back, but actually stay on the island and maybe spend some money there. That app has been developed over the last 12 months, working with a group called, I think it's the Citizens, the Citizens Project, which involves some island residents and the related Hudson-related companies. And TREBA is helping fund that project, which is about to go public now. And hopefully the app will be useful. The third project that we took on directly was to create what we called an engagement event that would raise money for the nonprofits as well as for some of the projects we're interested in on the island, and bring people together to recognize some of the fabulous work that people on the island do, whether it's on the island or nationally or internationally. We held the first engagement event October 23rd. I see many people at this meeting who were there, and I think it was a successful event from the point of view of having a full house. It was at the sanctuary. There were over 200 people there, and I think everybody had a good time and appreciated the honorees and enjoyed getting together with each other. One of the things we found with TREBA also is that we have 13 major members, which include almost all the owners of buildings, as well as several of the co-ops and condos on the island. And again, I think we're breaking down some of the barriers that so that there's less siloism and a little more people talking to each other and trying to help solve problems. So the engagement event ended up raising about $60,000 net, which has been awarded to 17 nonprofits. And I think if it hasn't been funded in the last week, it's getting funded in the next week or two. And so the nonprofits that received these funds are thrilled about it. And so we're happy to be able to do that. So between helping provide funding for the nonprofits and also making the major stakeholders aware of all the wonderful things these nonprofits are doing, all of this, I think, is what we've accomplished in what is about a year and a half of work. The organization was founded in July. It formally came together in July of 2023. So we're about a year and a half old. And again, we're not all of us live on the island. We're learning more and more about the island, but because we're major stakeholders, whether we live on the island or not, we want to see it be a wonderful place to be. So I'm open if anyone has questions, but that's my presentation.
Thank you, Skip. That was perfect. Thanks very much. We have a question from Rick and then Becca.
Skip, do you want to tell people how they may be able to get involved in TREBA?
Well,
it's like an associate status.
We have 3 membership categories. They can contact me at skiphartman@aol.com. But we have no staff. Whatever money we take in goes for projects to benefit the island. The categories of membership are associate member, which is $100 a year. And we have about 6 meetings that they're invited to, of course. So they have a voice. They don't have any vote. And then we have the 2 categories of membership: stakeholders with leases of 20 years or more, and stakeholders of 5 years to 20 years, which basically captures all of the merchants and all of the major investment-related projects on the island. But we welcome the involvement of individuals. They don't have to be businesses. And even if people are not members, if we have a project that requires the help of people who are not members, we will be reaching out to them. I mean, we have Cornell's a member. We try to, we reach out to them for certain things. And we on the app project, we worked with the Citizens Project Group. They're not members. So we'll reach out to people who have specific skills that can be helpful to us in accomplishing a specific project. But yes, $100 gets you membership.
Let's go to Becca, please. Thank you, Skip.
I just have a quick question about in terms of like finding out how much money you guys raise in the future, as well as like the current money that you've raised and who that's gone to. Is there an easy way to access that information, or is that something that like is on a website somewhere? Just so if someone wanted to understand better how you are funding or helping those kind of nonprofits you are
we don't have
getting money is going
any
to.
staff, and we don't have a big budget. We do not have a website. We have a grants committee that allocated the monies for this year, and the grants committee and the board of TRIBA, which consists of 7 people, they did determine that they did not want to make public the amount of money given to each of the 17 people, or not people, but groups that got grants. We have minutes of our meetings, and we have publicly disclosed who received money, but not the amounts they received. And we'd like to keep that information confidential.
Okay, so are you guys considered a public organization then?
We're a 501c6
Okay.
private, nonprofit organization. We're not a charity. And the reason for that is since the extension of the master lease is a key issue for us that we really want to be able to help make happen, we wanted to have the ability to lobby, which a 501c6 can do.
Correct. And then don't you have to just make public where that info or that money went with the 50C6?
Not to the best of my knowledge. I mean, and let me say this, if I have worked with other nonprofits who are 501c3s, and there we've, you have to fill out a chart, make to the Attorney General, you have to fill out a report. But even in that, I don't think you're required to say exactly how you spent every penny. So no, I don't think we're required to do that. If you think and can point me to someone who can explain to me that we are required to do it, of course we would do it, but we don't think we're required to do it. And the delicacy of it is that, I mean, we're not required to make any grants, but if we give somebody $2 and another person $1, we don't want to have to start getting into, well, why did you do this or that? It just, I think, makes what is, I think, a generous ask of all the major donors to the event. It makes it then an unpleasant thing, and maybe people back off and not give any money.
I agree with that. I just want to caution that if you're going to lobby on behalf of any businesses, then that's where that information I think is beneficial.
Noted.
Sorry, Skip. Did you want to say something else?
No. I just said I've heard the suggestion.
Great, thank you. Thank you. So Skip, thank you very much for taking the time, for waiting so long patiently, and then for telling us all about TRIBA. So you're welcome to stay for the rest of this. We're about to get into the whole discussion about priority boarding of the tram. I'm going to say a couple of things first before I hand over to somebody else. Firstly, for Rose and for Will, I've noticed that Zoom user is our friend Todd Stein, so you may want to just change his name to Todd as a board member. And then, so this item, we've decided at CB8 to make this a joint item between this committee, Roosevelt Island, and transportation, just like we did with the F train shutdown. One of the 2 co-chairs of transportation is Craig Lader, who's actually going to chair this item. I think it's the best thing that we do it this way. It actually frees me up to speak more freely by not actually chairing this item in terms of coming to resolution. So let me hand over to Craig, please. I'll stay unmuted as well, but I'll hand over to Craig.
All right, thank you, Paul. Good evening, everyone. First, I'm using a new computer. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So, as Paul mentioned, I will be chairing this portion of the meeting. One of the reasons, just a little background, and well, this will explain a little bit of how this is going to work, is typically when you are chairing a committee meeting, you are not supposed to be you're not supposed to be serving as an advocate in that role. You're supposed to be neutral. You're supposed to be just a moderator for the item. And if you want to speak your own opinion, you're supposed to essentially step aside or step down temporarily to be able to make clear that you are speaking from your own personal standpoint as opposed to representing the committee. So because this item is one in which Paul has been a leading advocate on, this, as he said, will allow him to be able to introduce and present it and be able to speak to it more freely. That's not to say that at some point I'm not going to provide my own feedback as well, but I will make clear when that is the case. And otherwise, I'm going to moderate this as I would my own transportation committee and try to do so in a fair and equitable manner for everyone. So with that, this item, as Paul said, is a discussion about the, I just want to make sure I have the correct title here. Let me just pull it up, excuse me. We are calling this a draft resolution for priority boarding of the Roosevelt Island tram for residents and workers. So if you have not had a chance to take a look, there is a position paper that was drafted that is posted on the Roosevelt Island Committee webpage on the CB8 website. And there is also a draft resolution that we will be discussing. So with that, I will allow Paul to take over again in this manner as a presenter and an advocate.
Great, thank you. Before I do speak, which I'll keep my comments really brief, I'm just curious to have a show of hands up those people, electronic hands, who intend on speaking tonight in support of this resolution. Can we have a quick show of hands?
And to be clear, you don't have to raise your hand now. You may be motivated to speak after hearing parts of the discussion. So do not feel as if you have to raise your hand now if you do wish to speak later on.
I was just trying to get a sense of if it's 5, 10 people or 30 people. So that's all. It's helpful to know. Thank you, everyone. We can lower hands again. That's fine. Thank you. I'm going to keep it very brief because I'd rather we actually heard from the folks who just raised their hands. As far as we are concerned, those of us who live or work on the island, the tram is no longer a method of transportation available to us. We're crowded out by 90% plus tourists. And so the comments we get from REARC, they quote to us the statute, the New York State Transportation Statute, which says that they cannot give any preference to any group of people. And we fundamentally disagree with that because that's not the words of the statute. The words of the statute are cannot give any undue or unreasonable preference. And that's where the magic is in the words. The words were written for a reason. These things are not crafted randomly. They're put there for a reason. So we think that REARC is reading the words wrong. Secondly, the tram is completely funded by ticket sales and leading to a shortfall of many millions of dollars. Brian will know more than I will the exact number. And the people who make the shortfall up are us, the residents, through our payments for our land leases, through our buildings. No money comes from the city or the state. So it raises the question whether this is a common carrier that's being discussed in this legislation or not. But as far as I'm concerned, my personal view is it's just the first point that's enough. We can't get on anymore. We've heard from people time and time again, and we think that REARC should be doing something different. If they need help with their legislators to get something changed in Albany, at least they should step up and ask for that. So I'm going to stop talking now. Craig, thank you for the opportunity. I'm happy to propose a resolution later, but let's hear from other people first, other neighbors.
All right, then. So again, for anyone who wishes to speak, you can use the raise hand function. If you go into at the bottom of Zoom, you know what? As of now, I'm trying to find where it is on my screen. Oh, it's under the React um, tab, and you will then find raise hand. So anyone who wishes to speak, feel free to raise your hand. We will go to members of the public first. So the first hand that I see is Becca. So if we could unmute Becca, please.
Hi, I don't know if this is gonna be my final. I just have some questions slash things that I didn't see covered. So one thing that I do want to call out is Paul. I don't know who would add that to the position, but I think that I've seen time and time again when we have this conversation, whether it be on our Facebook groups or in just public discourse, that people are really confused about who funds the tram. So I think having that call out in either the position paper or the actual resolution to know where that money comes from and have it clearly laid out to know X amount of dollars was spent on ticket sales and that funds the cost, I think could really benefit this position paper. And then the other question that I had was, how does this work? And I haven't seen this across any of the discussions. How does it work if say this does go through and there is priority boarding for residents? How does it work if I have a guest with me? Because I'd be a resident, but they would not be a resident. So if I'm bringing, like, for example, my mom's in town visiting, how would I bring her across? Or is she now having to wait in line and I can get across? So I think how to guess work is just a question I would have.
Okay. Look, thank you for the suggestion on the first point. It's a good point. And the second one, honestly, no idea. We're just trying to fight for the right to get us who live here or work here a chance to get home or to get to appointments. So we haven't got further than that. I'm sure there's a way of figuring that out, but this is not the time or place that I think we can figure it out. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Becca. Next with their hand up is Frank Ferrance. If we could unmute Frank, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So I'm president of the Residents Association on Roosevelt Island, and we've been actually doing a fair amount of research on this. So one thing I'd just like to point out, and it just overall, we understand there are a lot of problems, with, in effect, a lack of throughput on this. And I'm going to be precise about some of the things I'm talking about. On the funding of this, while there may be operational costs, that come from the residents, I also want to point out it's the state of New York that gave, I don't know, I recall this is a number like $25 million to help build this tram. So this is not just the residents doing this. I remember as RERA president back in 2008 through 2010, I was surprised but pleased that the state was particularly generous because the state has really not funded, much on Roosevelt Island since the Pataki administration. So, I just like to clarify that this is not completely funded by the residents. Okay. Number two is I'd like to explore what the prior questioner. So we've actually explored how to make this happen. And one of the ways that we've did is that we've spoken to public safety because they would be part of the enforcement side on this. And we've spoken, about this with some members in REAC. It goes something like this, is that REAC, not the residential agents, would be leading the program, and REAC would then provide some type of, it's going to be a photo ID. Think of like what do you have for your mass transit card? I'm a senior, so it's got my photo on the back side of it. The reason why it needs to be photo ID is because we spoke to public safety. You can't ask anyone for ID without them having a reason why maybe they're thinking you've committed a crime. So that's, it has to be photo ID, and this way you just see the card. The policy could be you can bring on one guest or something like that. That's not been decided, but that's certainly a reasonable thing on that. And we propose that the initial time frame on this would allow for 18 months approximately, so through June 30th, 2026, because there has to be an expiration on this. And if we're still having a problem a year and a half from now, we're going to have to think beyond that. In this case here, REOC, it's not REOC, but it's the residential managers, the managing agents, would be the ones who validate whether or not you're a person. So that who resides in the building. So that's where the authority is, and there's a variety of privacy reasons why you don't necessarily want REOC having all of that information. The third thing is that our proposal is that it's for residents, employees, and students, because employees have the same need to get here, and so do students. Those are students who live off island that need to get on island, or students who live on island that need to get off island during those things. So we've worked out actually a lot more of the details on this, and be happy to share that with you in writing. Now, getting back to your first question, which is on the rationale behind this. While I agree with the priority, or whatever we want to call it, the priority boarding, we think it should be approached in a slightly different way, which would probably be more effective and easier to accomplish. So, as you know, the tram has had a problem with it stopping suddenly, and then they've had to change it to 10.5-minute cycles, and it was using Wi-Fi on the radio system, and everyone knows about those problems. That's a design problem, and that's something that I had pointed out way back when, because that's a design issue for them. We are suffering from a throughput problem right now, because I've seen photos of the lines here, and while there have been some that have gone around the block, and that's caused by throughput issues, when I see that there's only 100 people outside, that could easily be fixed by the tram running double up, instead of every 15, every 7.5 minutes. But it doesn't happen, and that's because they have a throughput problem. They also have another problem, which is a safety problem that's mandated by Department of Labor. So Department of Labor has insisted that they have 10.5-minute cycles, because then the tram runs at a slower speed. One of the things we only recently discovered is that while the trams are in station, is that's when they're charging, and therefore, if the tram is out of station for 10.5 minutes, then it requires a longer charging time.
Hey, Frank, do you mind if I interrupt you for a quick second? I'm sorry to interrupt you. I wanted to try and keep this conversation on the idea of preferential
Can you give
boarding
me
or not.
45 seconds more? And I'll be
Yeah.
done.
Okay.
Thank you. I thank you for the intervention. So the issue is throughput. And so what I suggest, the way we approach this, is we say, because there is a design issue that we are suffering from, then we request a waiver. And that can be done in an easier way without requiring legislation, but simply ask for a waiver, because there's a design limitation on that. We see design limitations in the city, was it the promenade with the 2 lanes on the BQA? I think that should be the rhetoric, because I think that's going to be successful. You can ask the MTA for that. RIA can ask the MTA for that, the city through its franchise, and also the state through DOT, and then that addresses those things. And I think once you get the priority, which we don't have this, we're going to have to think of what portion of the throughput is allocated for, maybe it might be 80%, but that's a policy issue. So in support of this, we should focus on, it's a design issue that we ask for a waiver, and then we still can work on legislation, but I think that's the faster route to achieving this. And that's the actual causes. We need to fix the throughput of the tram, and that's going to be several months. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Frank. So I just want to respond to that in some capacity. So if those of you who have been involved in this issue aren't familiar with the case of Casco Bay Island, which is an island off of Portland, Maine, they have a ferry service in which they have now implemented a priority boarding program for its residents. And I could provide a link to this, but they have a legal memorandum in here that provides a lot of context to what they had to do in order to put a program like this into place. Now, granted, this is based off of Maine law, so this does not discuss the issues regarding common carriers, and that may be an entirely separate issue. But this is something that I think would be worth anyone who is interested in this issue to look over, because they found that there were a lot of limitations as far as what they were able to do in order to put in a priority boarding program. They had to make sure that the majority of the people that were boarding were still non-residents. They really had to make sure that they cannot discriminate against them. They had to make sure they were adhering to basically the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. And they also were not able to have anyone but residents use it. They were not allowed to, as far as I can tell, bring guests on board. So they um, had to have all these different limitations in place. And this is a sort of summer home type of island, I think, for many. So it is more of a seasonal service, and it serves a different purpose than the tram in Roosevelt Island. But again, I think it is still something that people may find informative and helpful, just as far as context. So I'm going to see if I could just put that in the link in the chat to share. All right, so with that, let me go to the next
Just one
speaker,
thing
and
for
that
you,
would
Craig,
be,
if I may, just one thing quickly. There's one person who couldn't get her hand to go up. So when you finish with Jimmy Starachi, can you ask for Luella Strites, please?
sure.
Thank you.
And if I forget, please remind me.
Sure.
So the next speaker is Margie.
Here we go. Okay, this is really getting very annoying. It's not rocket science. It's so easy to do. We've done it before. Somebody asked before how we're different from Governor's Island and Staten Island. We're not just public transportation. This is a public-private partnership. We pay the excess $2 million to maybe $3 million now fee to keep the tram running. If we didn't do that, there'd be no tram, so we wouldn't even have anything to worry about. But Frank mentioned before about the state putting in $25 million. They did. And who paid that? The New York State taxpayers, of which we paid our portion. But now we get charged again out of our ground rent to keep this thing running. So we clearly are people who are paying more and getting less. The last time we did it, again, it was very easy. We had REACT did issue some passes, but the buildings themselves, they knew who lived in their buildings. You were issued a pass. You were also issued a couple of guest passes, and entities like the tennis bubble, Skip Hartman would have X number of passes that he could give to his regular customers, or maybe even be able to do for people who, whenever they sign up. We don't want to stop people from coming over here and going to the retailers and visiting the island. All we want is for people who live here to be able to get back and forth in a reasonable amount of time, especially on a daily commute. I think we've been misinterpreting the law because we're looking at it strictly as a means of public transportation. And again, it's not hard to do. We're lucky in that we have 2 staircases. The logistics of it could work out very easily. And I don't know why we don't just do it. And if someone thinks it's wrong, let the state or the city or whoever objects to it stop us. I would not wait to get permission to do it. I would just do it. And that's that.
I'm with Margie, but anyway.
All right. Thank you, Margie. Next speaker is Amy Namdar.
Hi, everyone. Just wanted to chip in a recent experience I had, which was my son and I were coming home from Trader Joe's late at night. One night last week, it was dark and it was raining, and we couldn't figure out if it was worth it to go to the tram, or we just decided to take the subway. It could have been really helpful with 4 heavy bags of groceries. My son has special needs and waiting is hard for him, so we have to factor things like that into our decision. This is just one of many examples of my own. I won't go on at length. I will also mention my friend who is disabled and doing physical therapy so she can go back to work at Memorial Sloan Kettering as an hospitalist in the oncology department. She said the tram doesn't run on a schedule, anymore. We're not only dealing with the tourists, we're dealing with the schedule problems, and there is no consistent schedule because it goes every 10 and a half minutes. There's just so many problems. I think we need a common sense solution to this problem. Agree with Margie, let's ask for forgiveness, not permission. And, the tram, one neighbor said to me, the tram is Roosevelt Island. I think it's the first thing that we all think of when we think of Roosevelt Island. The first thing that we tell a friend who doesn't know what Roosevelt Island is a stranger. And it's really sad to think that residents would be reluctant to share the tram with other people just to prevent further overcrowding. And we will have to say to people we know, oh, don't take the tram. It takes forever. It's a sad thing for residents. And I think it's time to get serious about a solution. And I'm really, hopeful that something can be done to reform the communication between REAC, POMA, and PSD to get a functional, orderly tram platform with people who can reasonably get seats, not be jostled, etc. So that's really all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Amy. Next speaker is Joyce Shorts.
So I just want to go back and address what Frank had said. Frank, the 25 million was a capital expenditure. What we're talking about is the operating expenses that are ongoing. That capital expenditure came from our tax money, as Margie just mentioned. The operating expenses, the difference between the revenue that's generated from the tram and the actual costs of running the tram is coming out of the pockets of every single resident that lives here in this community. It's also, as Starlight mentioned, depleting other services that we pay for. We pay for public safety to keep the peace here on Roosevelt Island, and having 3 public safety officers on each end of the tram is depleting the service and the protections that we actually pay for. So it's really digging into our operating expenses, our operating budget here for REOC. Frank brought up the concept of a waiver. I would call it simply a executive order. Both the MTA and REOC are state agencies. The person who holds the lever for both of those state agencies is actually Governor Hochul. And there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be applying to Governor Hochul to create some kind of an executive order to get this done. Sooner is better than later. And I'm wholeheartedly in support of Margie's idea. Do it, let them tell us no. We'll get the press out here. It'll be a terrible embarrassment for them. Thank you. Oh, by the way, I'm going to have to leave. I have to cut out. I know that you're going to take a vote on the resolution. I've read the resolution. I'm wholeheartedly in support. So please include my voice in support of the resolution.
Hey, thank you,
All
Joyce.
right, thank you, Joyce. But just to be clear, it's only members of Community Board 8 and the public members of this committee that vote on it, and that there are only 2 public members that are appointed. So,
hey, Craig, can I jump in with something, please, before we move on to the next speaker?
sure.
So I'm here addressing this to Harley, I think, who is the representative of Assembly Member Seawright. You're on the Zoom here. I would ask you, please, to take note of what Joyce just said about the governor, the 2 state agencies. We'd like you, please, to pass this on to Assembly Member Seawright for us.
Light a fire under Governor Hochul, because that's who can pull the lever and get this done.
And we're very grateful for her support. We saw them mentioned in the newsletter. We got emails from her telling us what she'd spoken to REOC. So this is great. We love that she's helping us, actually doing something. But we're asking you to ask her to do this as well, please. Do you mind? Can we unmute, please, Harley?
I'd be happy to pass the message along, Paul.
Thank you very much, Harley. Thank you, Craig.
All right, thanks. So we're going to pass over James because he is a public member of this committee, so he will speak when members speak. So next is Craig on the iPad Pro.
Okay. With all due respect, you guys are very entitled. You're self-entitled. This is ridiculous. I hope that the board votes against this. I do not think you need priority. You get no priority. Margie's complaining about the time it takes to get from A to B. There are people who take the Long Island Railroad who spend an hour and a half on the train. People who take the MTA spend an hour and a half getting to the Manhattan. I mean, it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I can't understand how you guys can't wait. I mean, I stand and wait. I play tennis 4 times a week. I have my time. Why does a student get priority over me? It makes no sense. Students are not residents. They come in, they spend some time, they leave. And one of them even started this whole trouble with slowing down the train. So forget that. But the tram. More importantly, I live in Manhattan. I am coming back to my place. So if you're going to get entitlement to get on your tram faster because you live in Roosevelt Island, which I think is ridiculous, that I should get entitlement to get back to Manhattan ahead of you because I live on this island. And all of you whine and complain about, I got to wait a couple of minutes.
All right,
It's ridiculous. And I hope
Craig,
that you, Craig,
if you could
and you
please
push
not,
for this.
if you
And
could
also
please
on
not
top
hurl
of that,
insults as you're speaking.
no, I'm not insulting. I just think it's
We do have a
ridiculous what
decorum clause.
yes, I just think it's ridiculous. I think you should look at yourselves and say, oh my God, I can't believe this is going on. There's no way that all the people that play at Skip's Place, of all those people, there's got to be hundreds and hundreds of people that they're all going to sit there and wait for everyone to get online ahead of this. And we're coming to pay to play
I
on
think
the
it's
island.
enough now.
We
I
live
think
in,
it's enough.
no, it's not enough because you are all representing the Roosevelt Island people. And I'm the only one here representing the Manhattan people coming to your place. No one is here standing up for our rights as a public service to get on the tram like any other service that Manhattan provides. So
All right. I thank you, Craig, for your comments. I think we get the point. And again, I want to remind everyone that we all need to make sure that we are speaking respectfully and that we are not speaking in a tone in which we are whether intentionally or not unintentionally insulting those who previously spoke. You can disagree, but you can disagree civilly. So thank you for that. Next, we have Brian Daniels.
Hey, everybody. Sorry, if you hear a screaming toddler in the background, it's bath time. I just wanted to jump in really quickly. Just mention, I heard somebody talking about tram revenue and operating costs. Just a point of clarification, the tram revenue does cover the operating costs for the tram. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, Brian, if I could just ask you to clarify, and I think I know the answer. It is true, though, that the state does provide significant support on the capital side, correct?
Well, the island itself is self-funded. I mean, there have been instances, I think, where capital projects have been helped out by the state, but I don't know about it's not a frequent occurrence, I don't think.
Right,
So,
but there's that $25 million modernization project that I know that I was reading about. So I just want to understand if you know offhand to what extent that was the state that was supporting that.
yeah, I'm not sure, Craig. I'm sorry. I'll have to get back to you about that.
Okay, no worries. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. I believe Becca spoke before, so I think we have Verena now.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to say in response to what someone was saying earlier, that I think it's best for us all to work together and remember that we all live in the same city and that, in my opinion, I think Roosevelt Island, we have it a lot easier than literally everyone else, but our problems do matter. So that's all I wanted to say.
All right, thank you very much for those comments. All right, so let's now just go to the board members, and then if we have time, we possibly could come back to the public. So I apologize, Becca, but I just want to be conscious of everyone's time and give everyone a chance to at least speak once. So let's start with James, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I just want to say I wholeheartedly agree with Margie. I think it's great to ask forgiveness rather than permission in this case, because if we are dealing with a legal issue, it's also great to have that legal issue hashed out so that we either understand it better, the law is understood better by and large, or we change the law depending on what the current circumstances of society require. And this is something that is being lost on a lot of people, is that the internet and social media and the changes in the way commerce occurs and the way activity on the infrastructure of the places visited across the world. We're not, the only place. New York has always been inundated, over the years, but other places are also dealing with the same issues with transportation because people are able to spread the word on YouTube sites and Instagram sites, and it's easier to gather information on how to do a cheap date and a cheap, wonderful experience with a great photo in an otherwise expensive touristy visit. So these are the things that are changing how we function. And I think that requires a look at how we get on the public transportation that we have provided. And this antiquated small ride was created not for these purposes. Someone spoke about being entitled, and I think the what's lost, I think, on a lot of people when they look at the New York Post articles or the Times or wherever they're reading about this case, what's lost is that prior to this attraction to our tram by tourists and people looking for the great photo, is that we didn't really overwhelm the tram with residents. It wasn't always a full ride. Yes, in rush hour there were times, but I was always out of rush hour commutes. So for me, it was never really an issue to get on the tram. But it is now. It really is. And I think that that's what requires being looked at, not the question of whether anybody gets preferences. Now, and I'm going to keep it brief, but one of the things I've talked about with people in conversations with public transportation, okay, if you can electronically program all kinds of exemptions in congestion pricing through Easy Pass charges, if you can change the way Omni functions as a gateway into the subway system or the bus system, and there are other transportation apps and cards that electronically work all across the world. How can it not be possible that a person living on Roosevelt Island with proof of residence would not be able to acquire the exact amount of resident pass card that would allow them to get onto the tram? It just doesn't seem possible that that can't be achieved. That's fine for me. I'm finished.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, James. Let me actually try to respond to a few of your questions because I have some insight. And for those of you who don't know me, I do work in public transportation, so I have a lot of familiarity with a lot of the issues here. And James, you brought up the Omni question, and Omni is a little bit complicated, but there is a lot of potential that comes with it. And basically, I say that because the way that Omni is capable of working probably would allow for different programs to be set up through it. That doesn't mean it could happen tomorrow. There's a lot of work that would have to be done in terms of REAC working with the MTA that basically runs Omni. They are a subscriber to the Omni fare payment system in order to devise a way of coming up with a system that would meet the objectives of those who are looking to do this. And that would take time. There could be some potential cost involved in terms of if the technology had to be changed or modified in order to do that. But that being said, I believe that there is, in all likelihood, opportunities down the line for something like that to be able to happen through Omni. There is also, in all likelihood, an administrative cost to doing that because any program in which you're managing any type of pass or some identification of residents for the purpose of providing them with a specific type of fare payment method, we'll have to have some entity actually responsible for it and running it. And again, that's something I'm not saying yes or no in this case, but that's just a consideration that would need to be thought about here. So I hope that's helpful context. All right. Next is TJ Stein.
Hey, I just want to respond to a couple of things. First of all, I guess I heard a couple of people regarding the disabled. I'm by the state and city, I'm considered disabled. Nobody would see it. And I definitely appreciate those that actually spoke about that. But staying on priority, I heard this gentleman's talking about, playing tennis and what have you, and that we're whining on the island. I'm a Manhattanite. I live on the Upper East Side. I remember when the tram was built. I was in my teens. It was fun. I jumped on it. It was fun. The movies, Spider-Man were done. But it seems that there's a big difference between somebody that lives on the island, needs to get back and forth. And I was there during the summer, and the line was from the tram. It went around and back down the line, back down the street. And I thought to myself, this is nuts. I mean, the people on the line were basically standing there as, I don't want to use the word prisoners, but they couldn't get anywhere. And I feel terrible for the people on the island. Trader Joe's is right there. You only have a limited amount of shops and restaurants. I like to go to the island. I love that, there's Granny Annie's. I try to walk over to Four Freedoms Park. And I think that it is wonderful that people are going over there as tourists, and it's terrific. But as a resident, I would be absolutely very frustrated to be waiting for so long on a line. And there's tennis courts in Central Park. There's tennis courts all over. I appreciate that somebody wants to use the tennis courts there, but I also think that residents need priority. I'm a big supporter of the priority. And I think that we have a limited amount of access for the residents to get to the Manhattan Island, especially during the high traffic timing and during the tourist timing. So I am in full support, and I'm an Upper East Sider who's been a native to the Upper East Side. I fully support priority boarding. I wrote a couple of other notes. I can't really find them right now, but I am a person that just doesn't see there to be any reason why there shouldn't be. I do like the idea that the person who said that they may have to bring their mom. I understand that. As most know, my mom's wheelchaired. She's 91. I deal with this all the time with public transportation, and I really support this wholeheartedly. I don't see there to be any reason to hold back the residents from the island to gain access to what is one of only two plus a car on the northern side of the island. It's just seems crazy with this now, with the amount of tourism that's going there. And they don't even really seem to go toward the other part of the island. They seem to, from what I see, go on the tram to see the view and then just come back. So they don't even seem as tourists to be bringing as much money to the actual island and the establishments on the island. That's all I need to say. Thank you for hearing me.
All right, thank you very much, TJ. So now we do have a few new hands that are up from the public. So I just want to go to them, and then I'm going to say something, and then Paul, I feel like we should try to figure out what we are doing with your proposed resolution. So the next person with their hand up is Luella Stritz.
Hi, I am talking on behalf of seniors. I'm an advocate for seniors. I'm a senior myself. I work very closely with a lot of seniors on the island. And I have, I think, almost 200 signatures from seniors requesting for priority. I think this should really be a priority. I hate to sort of segregate us, but The seniors, disabled, and students really need priority on this without permission from anybody. I have talked to seniors. Most of them, we don't have a bank on the island. So all of them have banks now on 2nd Avenue and 3rd Avenue. This is the way they go. And seniors get cash. They don't use their credit cards. They don't use their cell phones. They're feeling very threatened riding the tram and going to the bank, getting their cash and coming back because they've been pushed left, right, and center. Another thing is I feel we should not wait for an accident before we get this priority boarding going.
All
Sorry.
right, thank you.
Did I lose you? Okay, sorry.
No, we still hear you. You're still
Okay.
on.
The other thing is the 63rd Street escalators are out. It's all boarded. So that means the seniors and disabled are not going to go to 63rd Street. We really need the tram. Today we were 3 people, 3 seniors on the tram, and we were all smiling because it was empty because of the snow. And we could actually get seats without asking. This is another thing. When we have to come home, we shouldn't have to ask anybody for priority. We should be able to walk onto our transportation. And so I'm sort of asking RIOC, please, to just go ahead and give priority to especially the disabled and seniors and the students right away. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, next we have Starlight.
Hi, I'm back again. I just wanted to thank Mr. TJ Stein for what he said, and I appreciate you as well, Luella. I also wanted to say that as a resident, as someone who's disabled, priority boarding is a must. And like she said, for the students, the elderly, it's kind of ridiculous the way, just like Mr. Stein said, that they just ride the tram around and the staff has to tell them to get off and pay if they want to go back to the other side. It has gotten out of control to the point that no one wants to take the tram. Even those who need it are afraid to get on it. Somebody recently got their phone snatched or taken while riding the tram because it's just too many people pushed onto the tram up against one another in close quarters. Taking the F isn't always an option because that means for me, myself, carrying heavy packages and walking from Trader Joe's all the way to 63rd and Lex is just absolutely deplorable. I'm not going to do that, especially in inclement weather. Okay. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have the F train, which in recent weeks has a lot going on. People being set on fire, people being stabbed, people being shoved and falling onto the platform and getting run over. And sometimes having to wait for 3 or 4 trains before you can get on a train that's not crowded so you can get a seat or anything. People trying to get their strollers on or anything. So sometimes that so-called quote unquote F train isn't always an option. The tram has been on the island since 76, and the F train didn't come until 13 years later. So the resolution with the IDs or something to prove that we're residents, we're not asking for a lot. We're just asking for what is right because in the last few months, things have gotten really ridiculous and they're getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And the fact that the snow kept some people away, that's a blessing because on most days when I use it, it's always congested. Always. There's never a time. And they're doing this late at night. Like I said before, that's a real disturbance to people who live on the island with people coming all times of day and night. There are other attractions throughout these 5 boroughs and guaranteed they're public. But there comes a time when things like the Edge, Metropolitan Museum, the Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building, all those have closing times. So you can't go and you can go over there and walk past the building, but you're not getting any type of entrance. And the fact that people are running around, tourists are yelling, saying, "Oh, we need to fast track this ride," like it's an amusement park, something, for their enjoyment, and not at all concerned or even realize that Roosevelt Island is a residential community with 12,000 residents who work and or live there. We don't have a problem like with anything or anybody riding in the transit, but when you're being disrespectful, you're not looking out for people who need it, and you're standing there blocking. Instead, one tram comes in the station, and certain tourists don't want to get on it because for some strange reason they think it's going to Brooklyn, or it's going to Queens, or it's going to Long Island, or being on one side versus the other is going to make that much of a difference. They're both sitting in the station on the platform. Where they land is just south or north. It doesn't change the view. And so it's really annoying when these people do this, and it's disruptive to everyone else for a variety of reasons. So we're asking for priority boarding because it's necessary. It's not because we're entitled, but when you're dealing with a disability, or when you're elderly, your kids trying to get home, you have parents who picking up their kids, they work right there, Memorial Sloan Kettering. They're picking up their kids from school, and they can't get on the tram and get home after a long day of work. It just absolutely makes no sense whatsoever. It's just, I can't imagine. I travel a lot. And when in Rome, do as the Romans is an old saying. But I truly believe that when I go someplace else, I'm very respectful of where I am. And this is why I make friends everywhere I go, and people always ask me to come back to their country or to where they live, come and stay with them, come to their homes, all this, because I respect. If you go someplace, you respect where people live. People just treat this city like it's a big garbage dump. And then the tourists that do come onto the island are doing just that. They're dumping their trash. I've seen them on the promenade doing
I'm
things they
sorry,
shouldn't be
Starlight, if
doing.
you could please
Yeah,
just try to wrap up.
right. I am. I'm wrapping up. I'm just saying it's just some things just need to be taken in consideration when showing reverence to our elderly or disabled. That's all.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate those comments. And then finally, we have Rick O'Connor, or O'Connor. Sorry if I messed up your name.
No, O'Connor is correct. So Craig, I have a question for you. You described yourself as a transportation expert in this area. So I'm just wondering, so according to the transportation law, it's unreasonable or undue priorities can't be instituted. Can you give me any example that you can think of that is a reasonable priority that could be established for the Roosevelt Island tram?
Yeah. I don't know that I am in a position to answer that. And I've tried to, just in preparation for this, do my research. And you know what? I think it's better off if I answer this question, but not as a co-chair, and give my opinion, if that's okay. But I want to stop you from speaking.
No, that was my question, because if creating a separate line for Roosevelt Island residents and workers is not a reasonable accommodation under the law, then I don't see what would be. So I'm just wondering. So I'm just wondering what would be, and do those words have any meaning?
So I am not a lawyer, so I do not even want to fathom a guess as to what would or could be considered or construed as a reasonable or not undue burden. And I think there are ways in which it may be able to be done, whether it's within the confines of a priority boarding or not. But that's where I think I have my own strong opinions. Um, just knowing public transportation. And so again, I'm saying this as my own personal opinion, not as in my capacity as chairing this. I think that this comes in many respects down to the distinction between whether the tram is truly public transportation or not. And I think one of the issues and concerns that I have about this whole discussion is that there are two pieces. It's the fact that it's not a private system. There's a public-private partnership. Yes, I understand how REAC works and that the operating funds are entirely coming from Roosevelt Island sources, but there is still a lot of state support ostensibly on the capital side, and I know we're going to hopefully get some clarity on that. But this, in my mind, makes this clearly a public transit system that you need to consider as something that is openly accessible and equally accessible to everyone. And I also believe that just in terms of the idea of priority boarding, that it is a real slippery slope here because you are going to encounter a lot of these issues as far as who should be getting it. Should it just be residents? Should there be residents and workers who are conducting business there? Should it be students? Should it be people who are doing other things, who are visiting friends and family who are there? Those are members of the public that use public transportation in the same capacity as residents and as tourists. And if I could use the analogy of we've all been on or attempting to board a train or a bus that is just too crowded and we have to wait for the next one. And I am extremely sympathetic towards the Roosevelt Island perspective here. I clearly there is an issue here with the crush loads of people who are coming onto the tram because it has been popularized in social media and it has always been known as a tourist attraction. But at the same time, because Roosevelt Island is so unique in the way in which it exists as a tourist destination and as a real life community that has schools and it has parks and it has businesses and it has institutions, that there are many people who may not be island residents that are looking to use it every day. And how do you create a way in which you could have a more equitable system where those who are the regular users are able to do so without being overburdened by the realities, which is it is a constrained system. There are only two cars. It can only run at a maximum capacity if everything is running perfectly. And that doesn't always happen. So there is a limited capacity that presents challenges there. I personally think that there is a model that would be much less of a legally questionable way of doing this, and that is through fare policy. And New York City Ferry to me is a really good example where they just recently instituted a system where you have a 10 pass that is basically at the same price, fare parity with the subway and buses at $2.90 currently. But if you buy a single ticket, it's $4.50. And as I was saying before, I absolutely believe that there are ways, excuse me, in which you can have a fare policy and fare structure for the tram that benefits those who are frequent users and doesn't get into the same the questionable legal areas that you'd have in terms of whether this is a common carrier and whether you have reasonable or unreasonable or undue restrictions that would be in place. So I think that's really where I'm coming from here in terms of the way that I'm approaching this. So I think.
So just to answer your question, the state spent $15 million on the tram modernization project, and REAC spent $10 million for a total of $25 million. for the entire project back in 2010, 2011 time period. That's what happened. In terms of what you just said about having a higher fare for users who aren't frequent users, that's not gonna, a $5 fare is not gonna stop any tourist from, waiting on the line. That's not gonna do any good at all.
No.
Yeah, I appreciate your concerns there. And that's why I think I wasn't saying that that is necessarily the answer, but I think my broader point was that there are fair policy approaches that you could take that I think would be less legally tenuous that could do the same thing. And again, that's just speaking from my personal opinion.
But
so
still,
with that,
but the law of reasonableness it must have some meaning. There must be something that's reasonable, some type of preference that's reasonable.
right. And I can't tell you, as I said, I'm not a lawyer, what that is, but from a public transportation perspective, there are policies that are in place in which there are different programs, maybe not for priority boarding purposes, but whether it be low income fares or fares that are mandated for people with disabilities and seniors that are at a lower rate. There may be other groups, privileged groups, I guess you could call them, that may also be afforded some opportunities as well. But again, I'm not looking to
I understand. Thank you.
To debate that. So I think that's really a point to consider. But I'm going to now come back as chair and no longer give my opinion. So I'm going to now just go back to Paul and ask how you want to handle this. I don't know if I'm trying to decide whether you formally introduce this resolution, and if that meant that you that you made a motion for it. If you want to make a motion for it, you can, and then we could allow members to discuss it, or we could then go to a vote.
I would like to make a motion.
All right. Is it seconded by a member of the board?
I see Laurie, I see TJ.
Okay, TJ seconded. All right, so does anyone from the board wish to discuss it further?
Before we vote, I'd like to just make one quick point. I think for the benefit of those few of you on this call who are not residents here, my own experience is I moved here 4.5 years ago. When I was first here, you might see 5, 10 tourists on the tram, maybe. It's 100 people on the tram. So you didn't notice them too much. And maybe a couple of years ago, it was 10 to 15 to 20, maybe. But what's happened in the last few months, literally since about the middle of the year, it's gone to about 80 or 90 or 150 because there's more tourists who can't get on. So it's exponentially changed in the last few months. And I'd like to make that very clear to those of you who don't live here. It's not just been a steady, gradual rise. It's suddenly gone explosive this last few months. That's what I wanted to say.
All right, thank you. James, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to second the motion.
It's already been seconded.
Yeah,
So if you want to call the question.
No, I'm good.
You can call the question, Jimmy, if you want to.
No, I think
somebody has to call the question. Laurie's calling the question.
Laura's calling the question?
Laurie
Okay,
did.
then. All right, so.
Hi, I'm calling the question.
Thank you, Laurie. Okay, so let me just read the roll and then we will vote. So I see it's myself, James, Laurie, Paul, TJ. Did I miss any other CB8 members? I don't believe I did.
No, you got everyone, I think.
All right. If you wish to vote no or abstain, please raise your hand. If you are voting yes, you don't need to do anything. All right, I am a no, so if you could just register that for me.
Yep.
But otherwise, this motion passes 4-1.
Thank you very much.
And the full board meeting in which this will be voted on will be taking place a week from Wednesday, that is the 15th. So if anyone did wish to speak on this, you would be welcome to speak in the public session where you would be limited to 2 minutes to speak in support of or speak in whichever direction you may wish to.
If I can add to
So-
that as well, it's very easy because you can do it on Zoom as well. And also the public session for the whole board meeting goes at the very start. So at 6:30 when the meeting starts, after a few minutes, all the public members speaking about anything on the agenda for that day. So you can be done early and not have to hang around for the whole meeting. So
All
I
right.
think we're going to take it back to the rest of the meeting. I think that means we've done the whole agenda. It's a long meeting for us, but very successful. Thank you everyone who's stayed so long speaking. It's so gratifying seeing so many people who are still who are very interested in what's going on and spending time like this. And thank you for the other CB8 board members who dialed in to join us as well.
Thank you, Paul,
Thank you.
for all your work. And Craig, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, everyone. Before we take a motion to adjourn, for those of you who may not be aware, today is Rose Klepper's last day as an employee of Community Board 8 Manhattan. And we want to just take a moment to thank her for all the work that she has done and contributed to this community and this committee. So I just wanted to make sure that we had a chance to do that here. And we wish her the best in the next phase of her life. I believe she is going back home to Holland. So best of luck to you, Rose.
Thank you so much, Greg. I appreciate it.
Best of luck, Rose.
Best of luck.
Good
So,
luck.
Any
We could come visit.
motions to close the meeting?
Move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Good night, everybody.